The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as William sat in his private study, staring at the official letter that had arrived just hours earlier. His hands trembled slightly as he read the words for the third time. Kate entered, quietly carrying 2 cups of tea, but stopped when she saw her husband's pale face. "What is it?" she asked, setting the cups down with a gentle clink on the wooden desk. William looked up at her with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He couldn't find the words at first, so he simply handed her the letter. Kate's breath caught in her throat as she read. The letter was from a small law firm in Wales, written in formal language that made her heart race. It spoke of a discovery, something that had been hidden for over 20 years, something that would change everything they thought they knew about their family. The couple had been through many challenges together. They had faced public scrutiny, family drama, and the constant pressure of royal duties. But this was different. This felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, not knowing if the ground beneath them would hold or crumble away. "How is this possible?" Kate whispered, her voice barely audible. She sank into the chair across from William, the letter still clutched in her hands. The words seemed to blur together as tears began to form in her eyes. William reached across the desk and took her free hand in both of his. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "But we have to find out the truth. We owe it to ourselves, to our children, to everyone who depends on us." The letter mentioned documents, photographs, and testimonies that had been kept in a safety deposit box for decades. Someone had recently passed away and left instructions for these materials to be delivered to William personally. The lawyer who wrote the letter claimed that these items contained information about William's birth that had never been made public. Kate felt her world spinning. She had married into the royal family knowing that their lives would always be under a microscope, but she had never imagined something like this. The careful structure of their lives, built on traditions and expectations that stretched back centuries, suddenly felt fragile. "The children," Kate said suddenly, thinking of George, Charlotte, and Louis. "What will this mean for them?" William squeezed her hand tighter, drawing strength from her presence even as his own composure threatened to break. "We'll protect them," he promised, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. "Whatever this is, whatever we discover, we'll face it together. We'll make sure they're safe." The letter had requested a private meeting at the law firm within the next week. It emphasized the sensitive nature of the information and assured complete discretion. The lawyer, a woman named Margaret Thompson, had worked with William's family before, though William couldn't remember exactly when or why. As the morning progressed, neither William nor Kate could focus on their scheduled activities. They moved through their routine meetings and appointments like actors playing roles, their minds constantly returning to the mysterious letter. Staff members noticed their distraction, but were too professional to comment. During lunch, they sat in their private dining room, barely touching their food. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with unspoken fears and questions. Finally, Kate spoke up. "Do you think your father knows?" she asked carefully. The relationship between William and King Charles had always been complex, marked by love but also by the weight of duty and expectation. William considered this for a long moment. "I don't know. If he does, why wouldn't he have told me? And if he doesn't, should we tell him before we know what we're dealing with?" These questions hung in the air like storm clouds. They both knew that whatever was in that safety deposit box could affect not just their family, but the entire monarchy. The institution they had dedicated their lives to serving might be built on foundations that weren't as solid as everyone believed. That evening, after their children were asleep, William and Kate walked through the palace gardens. The familiar paths and carefully maintained flowers usually brought them peace. But tonight everything felt different. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on them like a heavy blanket. "I keep thinking about my mother," William said quietly, as they paused beside a fountain. "She always said that the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how long people try to hide it." Kate nodded, remembering the stories William had shared about Princess Diana's wisdom and strength. She also said that facing the truth, even when it's painful, is always better than living with lies. As they prepared for bed that night, both William and Kate knew that sleep would be difficult. They lay in the darkness, each lost in their own thoughts, trying to imagine what the next week would bring. The letter sat locked in William's desk drawer, but its contents had already begun to reshape their understanding of their place in the world. Neither of them spoke about their fears, but both wondered the same things. What if everything they had been told about William's birth was wrong? What if there were secrets that could shake the very foundation of the crown? And most importantly, what would they do with the truth once they discovered it? The clock on their nightstand ticked steadily toward tomorrow, each second bringing them closer to answers they weren't sure they wanted to hear. The drive to Wales felt longer than usual, even though they had made the journey many times before. William gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, while Kate stared out the passenger window at the rolling countryside. They had decided to make the trip alone, without their usual security detail, using a private car that wouldn't attract attention. "Are you sure about this?" Kate asked for the third time that morning. She wasn't questioning their decision, but rather giving William another chance to back out if he needed more time. "No," William answered honestly. "But I don't think I'll ever be sure about something like this. We can't move forward without knowing what's in those documents." The law office of Thompson and Associates sat on a quiet street in Cardiff, tucked between a small bookstore and a tea shop. It was the kind of place that had probably been serving local families for generations, nothing like the grand legal firms that usually handled royal business. This ordinariness somehow made everything feel more real and more frightening. Margaret Thompson was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She greeted them personally at the door, having sent her staff home early to ensure complete privacy. Her manner was professional but gentle, as if she understood the emotional weight of what they were about to face. "Thank you for coming," she said, as she led them to a small conference room. "I want you to know that I've been a solicitor for over 30 years and I've never handled anything quite like this." The room was simple and comfortable, with a wooden table and chairs that had seen better days. On the table sat a metal box, unremarkable except for the way it seemed to draw everyone's attention. Next to it were several manila folders and what appeared to be old photographs face down. "Before we begin," Mrs. Thompson said, "I need you to understand that once you see these materials, there's no going back. The knowledge will become part of you and you'll have to decide what to do with it." William and Kate exchanged a look that spoke of their years together, their shared understanding, and their commitment to face whatever came next as a team. William nodded slowly. "We understand," he said. "We need to know the truth." Mrs. Thompson opened the metal box with a small key. Inside were documents that looked official but old, their edges yellowed with age. There were also several photographs and what appeared to be a handwritten letter sealed in an envelope. "These items were left in my care by a woman named Sarah Mitchell," Mrs. Thompson explained. "She passed away last month at the age of 78. She left very specific instructions that these materials should be given to you personally, Your Royal Highness, and only after her death." The name Sarah Mitchell meant nothing to William, but something about it felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. Mrs. Thompson picked up one of the photographs and placed it face up on the table. Kate gasped softly. The photograph showed a young woman who looked remarkably similar to Princess Diana, standing next to a man William didn't recognize. But what made his heart race was the baby the woman was holding. Even across the decades, the resemblance was unmistakable. "The woman in the photograph is Sarah Mitchell," Mrs. Thompson continued. "This was taken in 1982 according to the date stamp on the back, William's birth year." His hands began to shake as he reached for the photograph. The baby in the picture could have been him, could have been any baby, but something deep in his gut told him this was significant. Mrs. Thompson then picked up one of the documents. "This is a birth certificate," she said carefully. "But it's not the one that was filed with the official records." The paper was clearly old, and as William read it, he felt the room begin to spin. The certificate listed Sarah Mitchell as the mother and showed a birth date that was 3 days earlier than his official birthday. The father's name was listed, but it had been deliberately obscured with ink. "I don't understand," Kate said, her voice steady despite the shock written on her face. "What does this mean?" Mrs. Thompson opened another folder. "There are hospital records here, correspondence between Sarah Mitchell and certain members of the royal household staff, and sworn statements from 2 nurses who were present at the birth." William couldn't speak. He stared at the birth certificate, trying to process what he was seeing. If this document was real, it meant that everything he had been told about his early days was wrong. It meant that Princess Diana might not have given birth to him at all. "There's more," Mrs. Thompson said gently. She handed him the sealed envelope. "Sarah Mitchell wrote this letter specifically for you. She wanted you to hear her story in her own words." With trembling fingers, William broke the seal and unfolded the handwritten pages. Sarah Mitchell's handwriting was neat and careful, as if she had taken great care with every word. The letter began simply, "Your Royal Highness, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the time has finally come for you to learn the truth about your birth." As William read silently, Kate watched his face change. She saw confusion give way to shock, then to something that looked like grief. When he finished reading, he set the letter down and looked at Mrs. Thompson with eyes that seemed much older than they had been an hour earlier. "According to this letter," William said slowly, "Sarah Mitchell claims that she gave birth to me and that I was immediately taken to be raised as Princess Diana's son. She says she was told it was necessary for reasons she was never allowed to understand." Kate reached for William's hand across the table. "But why? Why would something like this happen?" Mrs. Thompson pulled out another document. "There are medical records here suggesting that Princess Diana experienced complications during what was supposed to be your birth. The records are incomplete, but they hint at a situation that may have threatened both mother and child." The implications hung in the air like a heavy fog. If Sarah Mitchell's story was true, it meant that William's entire identity was built on a carefully constructed lie. It meant that the line of succession, the very foundation of the monarchy, might be based on deception. "What happened to Sarah Mitchell after the birth?" Kate asked. "According to these documents, she was relocated to Wales and provided with a modest income for the rest of her life. She never married, never had other children. She spent her life keeping this secret." William felt tears threatening to spill over, but he held them back. The woman who had given him life had spent decades watching him from a distance, never able to claim him as her son, never able to be part of his life in any meaningful way. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an old clock on the wall. The weight of what they had learned pressed down on all of them, and for several long minutes no one knew what to say. The drive back to London passed in stunned silence. William kept the documents in a briefcase beside him, but they felt heavier than gold. Kate stared straight ahead, occasionally glancing at her husband's profile, watching him process information that challenged everything he had believed about himself. They had agreed to tell no one until they could verify the documents independently. The implications were too massive, too dangerous to share without absolute certainty. But even as they made this logical decision, both of them struggled with the emotional weight of what they had learned. "I keep thinking about her," William finally said as they approached the outskirts of London. "Sarah Mitchell. She watched me grow up from a distance, saw me get married, saw our children born. She knew she was my mother, but she could never say anything." Kate reached over and touched his arm. "We don't know for certain yet that she was telling the truth. These documents could be elaborate fakes. People have tried to deceive the royal family before." But even as Kate said these words, she knew they rang hollow. The photographs were too detailed, the hospital records too specific, the handwritten letter too personal to be fabrications. Something in her heart told her that Sarah Mitchell had been telling the truth, as impossible as it seemed. That night, after putting their children to bed, William and Kate sat in their private sitting room with the documents spread across the coffee table. They had called in favors to have a discreet expert examine the papers without revealing their contents or significance. The handwriting analyst confirmed that the letter was written by the same person over a period of several years, Kate read from the report. The paper and ink are consistent with documents from the early 1980s. The birth certificate appears to be genuine, though it was never filed with the official records. William picked up one of the photographs, studying the face of the woman who might have been his birth mother. Sarah Mitchell had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and there was something in her expression that reminded him of his own children when they looked at him with pure love. "If this is true," William said quietly, "it means Diana loved me enough to raise me as her own, knowing I wasn't biologically hers. That's not less meaningful, it's more meaningful." Kate nodded, understanding what he was trying to work through. "It also means that someone made an incredibly difficult decision 30 years ago, and everyone involved has been living with the consequences ever since." They had requested medical records from the hospital where William was supposedly born, but those had been sealed or destroyed decades ago, which was not uncommon for royal births. The official explanation had always been that such records were kept private for security reasons. The next morning brought a call that changed everything. William's private secretary announced that King Charles wanted to see him immediately for a private meeting. No reason was given, but the urgency was clear. William's stomach dropped. Had someone discovered their investigation? Had word leaked about their visit to Wales? He dressed carefully, trying to prepare himself for a conversation he had hoped to avoid until they knew more. The meeting was set to take place at Clarence House, in the same study where Charles had told William about his engagement to Camilla years earlier. When William arrived, he found his father sitting behind his desk, looking older and more tired than usual. "Sit down, William," Charles said without his usual pleasantries. "We need to discuss something important." William took the chair across from his father, his heart pounding. The briefcase with Sarah Mitchell's documents was locked in his car, but he felt as if the truth was written across his face. "I received a call yesterday from Margaret Thompson," Charles continued. "She felt obligated to inform me that you had visited her office and reviewed certain documents that had been left in her care." The room seemed to shrink around William. His father knew, but how much did he know and how long had he known it? "The documents concern Sarah Mitchell," Charles said carefully, watching William's reaction. "I can see from your face that you've read them and that you're struggling with what they contain." William found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Are they true?" Charles was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the garden where William had played as a child. When he turned back, there were tears in his eyes. "Yes," he said simply. "They're true." The confirmation hit William like a physical blow. All the doubt and hope that the documents might be fake crumbled away, leaving him with the stark reality of his situation. "Why?" William asked. "Why wasn't I told?" Charles stood up and walked to the window, his back to his son. "Your mother, Diana, had a very difficult pregnancy with you. There were complications that threatened both of your lives. The doctors weren't sure either of you would survive." William waited, knowing there was more to the story. At the same time, Sarah Mitchell, who worked as a nanny for a family friend, was also expecting. She was young, unmarried, and had no family support. When Diana's situation became critical, someone suggested an arrangement that would solve both problems. The words hung in the air like a confession. William tried to imagine the desperation, the fear, the impossible choices that had led to his unusual beginning. "Sarah Mitchell agreed to the arrangement?" William asked. "She was told that her child would have opportunities she could never provide," Charles said, turning back to face his son. "She was also told that it was the only way to save Diana's life, though I'm not certain that was entirely true." William felt anger beginning to build alongside his grief and confusion. "So I was bought? Traded? Like some kind of business transaction?" "No," Charles said firmly. "You were loved. From the moment Diana held you, you were her son in every way that mattered. She never once treated you as anything other than her own child." "But she knew the truth?" "Yes, she knew. And it tortured her. She wanted to tell you when you were older, but the advisors, the government officials, everyone convinced her that the truth would be too dangerous for the monarchy." William thought about all the times his mother had seemed sad or distant, all the occasions when she had hugged him a little tighter than necessary. Now those memories took on new meaning. "What about Harry?" William asked suddenly, realizing. He hadn't thought about his brother until this moment. Charles's expression grew even more pained. "Harry is Diana's biological son. The pregnancy that produced him was normal, healthy. She often said that having Harry helped heal the wound of what happened with your birth. The knowledge that his brother was truly royal-born while he was not added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. William felt as if his entire identity was dissolving and reforming moment by moment. "Does Harry know?" William asked. "No," Charles replied. "And that's something we'll need to decide together how to handle." William sat in silence, trying to process 32 years of his life in light of this new information. Everything felt different now, but also strangely the same. He was still the same person, still the same husband and father, still someone who had dedicated his life to service. But the foundation of that service had shifted in ways he was only beginning to understand. The conversation with his father left William feeling hollowed out and uncertain about everything he had believed about his life. He drove home slowly, taking the long way through London's familiar streets, trying to find something solid to hold onto in a world that suddenly felt unstable. When he arrived at Kensington Palace, Kate was waiting in their private quarters. She took one look at his face and knew that their worst fears had been confirmed. "He knew," William said without preamble, as he sank into his favorite armchair. "My father has known the truth my entire life." Kate moved to sit on the arm of his chair, her hand immediately finding his shoulder. "Tell me everything," she said softly. As William recounted the conversation with Charles, Kate felt her own understanding of their family shift and reshape. She had married into this family believing she understood its complexities, its traditions, its sometimes difficult relationships, but this revelation exposed layers of secrecy and pain that she had never imagined. "What does this mean for us?" Kate asked when William had finished. "What does it mean for our children?" It was the question that had been haunting William since leaving his father's study. George, Charlotte, and Louis carried royal blood through their mother's line, but if William himself wasn't biologically royal, what did that mean for their place in the succession? "I don't know," William admitted. "Father says that legally, nothing changes. I was acknowledged as Diana's son from birth, raised as such, and the succession is based on that legal reality, not on biology." But even as he repeated his father's reassurances, William struggled with the moral implications. Was it right to continue in a role that was based on what was essentially a lie? Could he continue to represent the crown, knowing that his claim to it was built on deception? That evening, they made the difficult decision to tell their children an age-appropriate version of what they had learned. They couldn't risk the children hearing rumors or discovering the truth from someone else, and they wanted to control how the information was shared. George, at 10 years old, was the most likely to understand the implications. They sat him down in the library after Charlotte and Louis had gone to bed. "We need to tell you something important about our family," Kate began carefully. "Something that might be confusing, but something you need to know." George looked between his parents with the serious expression he wore when he sensed adult conversations that might affect him. He had already learned to read the weight of royal responsibility in the way his parents sometimes spoke to him. "You know that families can be formed in different ways," William continued. "Sometimes children are raised by people who aren't their biological parents but who love them just as much as if they were." George nodded, having learned about adoption and different family structures in school. "We've discovered that this might be true for me," William said. "The woman I always believed was my biological mother, your grandmother Diana, may have actually adopted me when I was a baby." The boy's eyes widened as he tried to process this information. "So, Grandmama Diana wasn't really your mom?" "She was my mother in every way that mattered," William said firmly. "She raised me, loved me, taught me everything I know about being a good person, but there was another woman, named Sarah, who may have given birth to me." George was quiet for a long moment, working through the implications with the logical mind that often impressed his teachers. "Does this mean I'm not really a prince?" The question cut straight to the heart of William's own fears. Kate reached for George's hand while William struggled to find the right words. "You are exactly who you've always been," Kate said. "Your father is the same person he's always been. Love and family aren't about biology alone. They're about commitment and care and choosing to be there for each other every day. But some people might say, we're not the real royal family anymore," George said with the sharp insight of a child who had grown up understanding that his family was different from others. William knelt down to be at eye level with his son. "George, there are going to be people who question everything about our family for the rest of your life regardless of this discovery. Some people will question whether we deserve our positions, whether we're doing enough good, whether the monarchy should exist at all. That's always been true. What matters," Kate added, "is that we know who we are and what we stand for. We know that we're committed to serving people, to making the world better, to being a family that supports each other, no matter what." The next few days passed in a strange mixture of normalcy and unreality. They maintained their public schedule, attending charity events and official functions, all while processing information that could potentially reshape the monarchy. William found himself studying his reflection in mirrors, looking for traces of Sarah Mitchell in his features, wondering what parts of his personality came from genetics he had never known he possessed. Kate watched her husband struggle with questions of identity and belonging that she couldn't fully understand but could certainly empathize with. She had experienced her own version of this when she first joined the royal family, trying to figure out how to be herself, while also fulfilling expectations that sometimes seemed impossible to meet. The decision about what to do with their knowledge weighed heavily on both of them. They could keep the secret, as it had been kept for over 30 years, and continue their lives as if nothing had changed. Or they could find a way to reveal the truth, accepting whatever consequences that might bring. "I keep thinking about Sarah Mitchell," William said one evening as they walked through their garden. "She gave up her son so that Diana could have a chance at motherhood, and so that I could have opportunities she couldn't provide. She sacrificed her own happiness for what she believed was the greater good. And now you're facing a similar choice," Kate observed. "Keeping the secret protects the institution and our children's future. Revealing it honors Sarah Mitchell's sacrifice and gives her story the recognition it deserves." They had also begun to consider the broader implications of their discovery. If the truth came out, it would raise questions about what other secrets the royal family might be keeping. It could fuel Republican movements and undermine public trust in the monarchy. But it could also demonstrate the family's capacity for love that transcends biology and its ability to make difficult decisions for the welfare of others. "There's something else we need to consider," Kate said carefully. "What if there are other people who know the truth? What if someone else has documents or evidence that could come out at any time?" It was a sobering thought. Living with this secret meant always being vulnerable to exposure, always wondering if someone else might have the power to reshape their lives without their consent. That night, as they lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of the palace settling around them, both William and Kate knew they were approaching a decision point. They couldn't continue indefinitely in this state of uncertainty and secret knowledge. "Whatever we decide," Kate said in the darkness, "we decide together." William reached for her hand, grateful once again for the partnership that had sustained him through every challenge he had faced since their marriage. "Together," he agreed, knowing that the next few days would determine not just their own future, but potentially the future of the monarchy itself. The decision came to them in an unexpected way, through a phone call that would change everything they had been planning. William's private secretary informed him that a journalist had contacted the palace, claiming to have information about William's birth that contradicted official records. William and Kate sat in stunned silence as they realized that their window for controlling this narrative was rapidly closing. Someone else knew, and that someone was prepared to make the information public whether they cooperated or not. "We need to get ahead of this," Kate said, her years of experience with media crises kicking in. "If we're going to tell this story, it needs to be on our terms and our words with our context." They immediately called an emergency meeting with Charles, along with the most trusted advisors in their inner circle. The gathering took place at Windsor Castle in a private room that had witnessed countless royal family discussions about matters of state and personal crisis. Charles looked older than his years as he sat at the head of the long table. The journalist claims to have hospital records and correspondence that corroborate the documents you've already seen, he told them. Our legal team is exploring options for preventing publication, but their preliminary assessment is not encouraging. The palace's communications director, a woman named Victoria Hartwell who had guided the family through numerous scandals, spread out a series of proposed statements and press strategies across the table. We have several options, she began. We can deny everything and paint this as an elaborate hoax designed to damage the monarchy. We can acknowledge some truth to the story while minimizing its significance. Or we can take control of the narrative by releasing a comprehensive statement that tells the story from our perspective. William studied the different approaches, but his mind kept returning to Sarah Mitchell and the sacrifice she had made. What would each of these approaches mean for Sarah Mitchell's memory? He asked. Victoria looked surprised by the question. Sir, with respect, our primary concern should be protecting the institution and your family's position. Sarah Mitchell is part of my family, William said quietly but firmly. If she was my birth mother, then her story matters. Her choice to give me up so that Diana could be a mother and so that I could have opportunities she couldn't provide deserves to be honored, not hidden or denied. Charles watched his son with a mixture of pride and concern. William, I understand your feelings, but we must consider the constitutional implications. If the public believes that the heir to the throne is not of royal blood, it could destabilize the entire system. Kate had been listening carefully to the entire discussion, but now she spoke up. What if we frame this differently? What if we tell this story not as a scandal or a deception, but as an example of the lengths to which people will go to protect and nurture children? Everyone at the table turned to look at her, intrigued by this unexpected perspective. Diana wanted desperately to be a mother, Kate continued. Sarah Mitchell found herself pregnant without the support she needed to raise a child. The arrangement they made benefited everyone involved. William grew up loved and cherished. Sarah Mitchell knew her child was safe and cared for, and Diana got to experience the joy of motherhood. Victoria began taking notes rapidly. This approach could work, but only if we have absolute control over every detail of how the story is presented. They spent the next several hours crafting a statement that would acknowledge the truth while contextualizing it in a way that emphasized love, sacrifice, and the different ways that families can be formed. The statement would reveal that William had recently learned of his adoption, that he honored both Diana's memory and Sarah Mitchell's sacrifice, and that this knowledge had only strengthened his commitment to service. But as they worked on the language, William found himself struggling with a deeper question. Should he continue as heir to the throne knowing what he now knew? Was it ethical to maintain his position in the succession when that position was based on a legal fiction? I need to know what Sarah Mitchell would have wanted, William said, suddenly interrupting a discussion about which photographs to release to the media. What do you mean? Charles asked. I mean, did she ever express any wishes about whether I should know the truth? Did she have opinions about my role in the monarchy? Did she feel that what happened was right or wrong? It was Victoria who answered. Actually, sir, there's something we haven't told you yet. The journalist who contacted us claims to have additional materials from Sarah Mitchell, including a video message she recorded before her death specifically for you. The room went silent. William felt his heart racing at the thought of hearing Sarah Mitchell's voice, of seeing the face of the woman who had given him life, but had never been able to claim him as her son. The journalist is willing to provide us with a copy of this video in exchange for exclusive access to your official response, Victoria continued. It's not ideal from a negotiating standpoint, but it might be our only opportunity to see what she wanted to tell you. William looked at Kate, seeing his own mixture of hope and fear reflected in her eyes. They were about to hear from a woman whose existence had been hidden from him his entire life, a woman who had watched him grow up from a distance, who had kept the secret of his birth even as she aged and faced her own mortality. Let's see the video, William said. The journalist arrived at Windsor Castle 2 hours later, a middle-aged woman named Rachel Morrison, who had built her career investigating historical mysteries and uncovered truths. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew the value of the information she possessed, but also with a surprising gentleness that suggested she understood the emotional weight of what she was sharing. "Before you see this," Rachel said as she set up her laptop in the same room where they had been meeting, "I want you to know that Sarah Mitchell recorded this message just 3 months before she died. She was in hospice care, but her mind was completely clear. She knew exactly what she wanted to say." The video began with an image of Sarah Mitchell sitting in what appeared to be a comfortable chair in a small, well-lit room. She looked frail, but alert, and when she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "Your Royal Highness," she began, "if you are watching this, then you know the truth about your birth. I have spent 32 years wondering if I made the right choice, and I want you to know why I made the decision I did." William gripped Kate's hand as they listened to the woman who might have been his mother explain the circumstances of his birth, her feelings about the arrangement, and her hopes for his future. Sarah Mitchell spoke with a dignity and grace that reminded William powerfully of his own mother, Princess Diana. But it was her final words that would change everything. "I gave you to Diana not because I didn't want you, but because I wanted you to have the best possible life. You were born to serve others, to use your position to make the world better. That calling doesn't come from your bloodline, it comes from your heart. I hope that learning the truth about your birth doesn't make you question your worth or your place in the world. You are exactly where you belong, doing exactly what you were meant to do." The video ended, but Sarah Mitchell's words continued to echo in the quiet room. William sat motionless, tears streaming down his face as he processed the message from the woman who had given him life. Kate's own eyes were wet as she watched. Her husband absorbed the final gift from his birth mother. "She knew," William whispered. "She knew exactly who I became, and she was proud of it." Charles, who had remained silent throughout the video, now spoke softly. "She sent letters over the years. I never told you because I thought it would be too painful, but she wrote to me about your accomplishments, your marriage, your children. She never asked for anything except to know that you were happy." This revelation hit William like another wave of emotion. The woman who had sacrificed her right to be his mother had spent decades quietly celebrating his milestones from afar, finding joy in his happiness, even though she could never be part of it. Rachel Morrison had been watching the family's reactions, carefully. "There's one more thing," she said gently. Sarah Mitchell left specific instructions about what should happen after this truth came out. She wanted to be buried in Wales, where she spent most of her life, but she asked that if you ever chose to acknowledge her publicly, a small memorial service could be held so that people who knew your story could honor her sacrifice. The idea of honoring Sarah Mitchell publicly felt right to William in a way that surprised him. For 32 years, this woman had remained invisible, her contribution to his life and to the monarchy unrecognized. Perhaps it was time to change that. Over the next week, William and Kate worked with their communications team to craft a response that would reshape how the world understood their family. The statement they prepared was unlike anything the royal Yu family had ever released. It was personal, emotional, and honest in ways that broke with centuries of tradition. The announcement was scheduled for a Sunday evening, when the family could control the timing and context of the revelation. William insisted on delivering part of the statement personally, in a recorded video message that would accompany the written release. As the cameras rolled in the same room where they had watched Sarah Mitchell's video, William spoke directly to the nation and the world about what he had learned. "Recently, I discovered something about my birth that has changed my understanding of my own story," he began, his voice steady but clearly emotional. "I learned that the woman I have always known as my mother, Princess Diana, was not my biological mother, but chose to raise me as her own son when my birth mother, Sarah Mitchell, made the difficult decision to place me in her care." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "This discovery does not diminish my love for Princess Diana or my gratitude for everything she gave me. If anything, it increases my appreciation for the depth of her love and her commitment to motherhood." She chose to be my mother every single day, and that choice created the bond between us that shaped who I am today. William then spoke about Sarah Mitchell, describing her as a woman of extraordinary courage who had made an impossible choice out of love. He announced that a memorial service would be held in her honor, and that a scholarship fund would be established in her name to help young mothers who found themselves in difficult circumstances. Sarah Mitchell's sacrifice allowed me to serve in ways she never could have imagined. William continued. But her gift wasn't just to me or to my family. It was to everyone who has been touched by the work that Diana and I have been able to do because of the opportunities Sarah's decision made possible. The public response to the revelation was unlike anything the royal family had experienced. While some critics questioned William's legitimacy, the overwhelming reaction was one of compassion and respect for the difficult choices that had been made by everyone involved. Letters poured in from families who had been touched by adoption, from single mothers who understood Sarah Mitchell's impossible position, and from people who saw the story as an example of love that transcended biology. Many wrote about how William's honesty about his own complex family history made the royal family seem more relatable and human. The memorial service for Sarah Mitchell was held on a beautiful spring morning in the small Welsh town where she had lived for most of her life. William and Kate attended along with a small group of people who had known Sarah over the years. It was a simple service, focused on celebrating the life of a woman who had lived quietly but had made an extraordinary impact. During the service, William spoke about meeting Sarah Mitchell through her letters and her final video message. She taught me that motherhood is not defined by biology, but by love, sacrifice, and commitment, he said. She showed me that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. After the service, William and Kate visited Sarah Mitchell's simple grave. They left flowers and stood in silence for several minutes, paying respects to the woman whose decision had shaped all of their lives. In the months that followed, William found that his understanding of identity, family, and service had been fundamentally changed by his discovery. He became an even stronger advocate for children in care, for single parents, and for families formed through adoption. The scholarship fund established in Sarah Mitchell's name helped dozens of young mothers complete their education and build stable lives for their children. The constitutional questions raised by the revelation were ultimately resolved in William's favor. Legal scholars and government officials determined that his position in the succession was secure, based on the principle that legal acknowledgement and upbringing mattered more than biological connection. But more importantly for William, the discovery had given him a deeper appreciation for the complexity of love and family. He understood now that his identity had been shaped not just by Princess Diana's love, but also by Sarah Mitchell's sacrifice. Both women had contributed to making him the man, husband, and father he had become. One evening, as William tucked his children into bed, George asked him a question that showed how much the family had grown from their experience. Daddy, do you think we would have loved Sarah Mitchell if we had known her? William smiled, thinking about the gentle woman whose face he had seen only in photographs and videos, but whose influence he felt every day. I think, George, that we already do love her. Love doesn't always require knowing someone personally. Sometimes it's enough to understand what they've given you and to honor that gift by living the best life you can. As William turned off the lights in his son's room, he reflected on how profoundly his understanding of his own life had changed. The tears he and Kate had fought back that first morning seemed like they had happened years ago, though it had been only months. The truth behind that open door had indeed been unforgettable, but it had also been transformative in ways he could never have anticipated. Sarah Mitchell had given him life twice, first through birth and then through the wisdom of her final message. In learning her story, William had discovered not just his origins but his purpose renewed and strengthened by the knowledge of the love that had shaped his beginning.